Have you ever seen someone return food at the grocery store because they couldn't afford it? James, a discreet millionaire, never imagined that witnessing that scene would change his life forever. In a bustling supermarket, a young mother was trying to explain to her 6-year-old son why they had to put items back on the shelf, while the boy, holding back tears, returned a box of cookies saying, "It's okay, Mum." What James decided to do in that moment opened the doors to a story of generosity, dignity, and an unexpected love. Stay until the end, because what this mother discovered about who really helped her will leave you speechless. James walked through the aisles of the supermarket with his cart nearly empty, browsing products like any ordinary customer. At 40 years old, he had learned that true wealth wasn't shown through fancy watches or luxury cars, but kept in the heart and in actions. That Saturday afternoon, dressed in simple jeans and a plain white cotton shirt, no one would have guessed he owned the entire chain of stores. He liked visiting his branches this way, without bodyguards or fanfare, just to feel the real pulse of his business. While comparing coffee prices, he heard a soft voice from the next aisle, a voice that sounded tired, but full of tenderness. "Sweetie, today Mom can only get the essentials," it said in a tone trying to be firm, but trembling slightly. James stopped in his tracks, feeling a lump in his throat without knowing why. Something in those words touched a deep chord, as if the universe was urging him to pay attention. He left his cart aside and peeked discreetly into the aisle of cookies and cereals. What he saw left him completely still. A young woman, no more than 28, was crouched in front of her son, a boy about 6 with dark hair and big eyes, shining with a mix of sadness and understanding. She wore a simple olive green dress worn at the seams, a beige cardigan with some loose threads, and flat brown sandals that had seen better days. Her dark brown hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and her honey golden eyes reflected a strength contrasting with the vulnerability of the moment. James noticed her hands trembling slightly as she held a crumpled shopping list full of crossouts and notes. The little boy, Ethan, dressed in a white t-shirt and patched denim pants, stared at the cart that barely had basics: rice, beans, some oil, and vegetables. "Mom, what about the cookies I like?" the boy asked in a voice that broke the heart. Emily took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a second as if asking for strength, and replied with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Honey, the cookies can wait. It's okay. Today we need other more important things." The silence that followed was more eloquent than any shout. Ethan nodded slowly, his small shoulders slumped as if carrying an invisible weight. He walked to the shelf with the chocolate chip cookies, the ones with the teddy bear on the package, and picked up a box with his little hands. He looked at it for a few seconds. His eyes scanned every detail of the wrapper, as if memorizing the moment. James, from his spot, felt his heart tighten with each passing second. He saw the boy caress the package tenderly. Then he looked at his mother, who was trying to hold back tears, and finally placed it back on the shelf with almost ceremonial care. "It's okay, Mum," Ethan said in a voice too mature for his age. "I don't need them." Emily brought a hand to her mouth, biting her lower lip to avoid crying in front of her son. "You're my hero, my love," she whispered as she hugged him tightly, hiding her face in the boy's small shoulder. James felt something break in his chest, as if all his business meetings and professional successes became insignificant before this scene. He had never seen such dignity in such a simple act. James stayed hidden among the shelves, watching as Emily took a breath and stood up, trying to compose herself. She checked her list again, calculating mentally with her fingers, moving her lips silently as she added and subtracted. From her old fabric purse, she pulled out a small wallet and counted the coins and crumpled bills she had. Her hands shook slightly. "We have to return the chicken, son," she said with a broken voice. "With the beans and rice, it'll last us the week." Ethan looked at her with those huge eyes and asked, "And are you going to eat, Mum?" The question echoed in the aisle like an echo that refused to fade. Emily smiled. That mother's smile hiding 1,000 worries behind a veil of love. "Of course, my dear. Mum's always fine." James clenched his fists. He felt a contained anger against the world's injustice, against circumstances putting a mother in that position. But more than anger, he felt a deep determination, a certainty that this moment wasn't coincidence. Something inside him knew he had to act, but he had to do it with respect and delicacy. Emily started walking toward the meat section to return the chicken, with Ethan walking silently beside her. The boy dragged his feet slightly, his head a bit down, but holding his mother's hand firmly. James followed at a prudent distance. His mind raced, thinking how he could help without offending, without making this woman feel bad, who clearly had admirable pride. He watched as she returned the chicken package to the fridge, stroking the wrapper as if saying goodbye to something important. "Excuse me, sir," Emily said to the employee stocking products. "I made a mistake taking it." The young employee nodded without much attention, perhaps used to similar scenes. James felt a weight in his stomach, a mix of sadness and admiration for this mother who kept her composure despite everything. He took a deep breath, adjusted his shirt, and decided it was time to approach, not as the millionaire owner of the chain, but as a simple human who had witnessed something that touched his soul. He walked toward them with firm steps, but with his heart pounding as if it might jump out of his chest. "Excuse me, ma'am," James said softly, as he approached Emily and Ethan in the produce aisle. She turned startled. Her honey eyes met his, and for an instant there was an awkward silence. James noticed her tense slightly, as if protecting herself from something unknown. "I'm sorry to intrude," he continued with a kind smile, "but I overheard your situation in the aisle back there without meaning to, and I was wondering if you'd let me help with your groceries." The words came naturally, but Emily stepped back. Her face flushed immediately. "No, sir, thank you, but we don't need charity," she replied firmly but politely. Her chin lifted with dignity. James admired that reaction, that strength emanating from someone who, despite difficulties, didn't lose her self-respect. "It's not charity," he explained calmly. "Just one person helping another." Emily shook her head, grateful but resolved not to accept. Ethan watched the scene with his big eyes, studying the stranger with childish curiosity. The boy tugged gently on his mother's dress sleeve, drawing her attention. Emily crouched to listen as Ethan whispered something in her ear, so quietly James couldn't hear, but he could see the tenderness in that moment. "Mom," Ethan said in his little voice, "he seems like a good guy. Look at his eyes." Emily looked at her son in surprise. Then she looked back at James with a different expression, as if evaluating him from a new perspective. James crouched to Ethan's level, resting his hands on his knees. "Hey, champ," he said with a genuine smile. "What's your name?" The boy hesitated, looked at his mother for approval, and then replied, "Ethan." James extended his hand for a formal shake. "Nice to meet you, Ethan. I'm James." The little one shook his hand seriously, like a miniature adult. "You know what, Ethan?" James continued. "I saw you return those cookies a while ago, and that was really brave of you." The boy's eyes lit up slightly, surprised someone noticed his sacrifice. "Not many kids would do what you did," James added as he stood up, now directing his attention to Emily. "Your son is a real hero, ma'am. Someone who thinks of his mom before himself. And that, believe me, is something you don't see every day." Emily felt tears threatening again, but held them back strongly. "He's a good boy," she said with a trembling voice, full of maternal pride. James nodded and continued, "That's why I'd like to ask a favor, if you'll allow it." Emily looked confused, not understanding where he was going. "I'd like the honor of giving something special to this little hero for his bravery and big heart. It's not charity, ma'am. It's recognition." Emily opened her mouth to refuse again, but Ethan interrupted. "Mom, please," the boy pleaded with bright eyes. "The guy's cool." The simple expression sounded so natural from the child's lips that James couldn't help but smile. Emily looked at her son, then at the kind stranger, and finally sighed in resignation. "Okay," she accepted in a barely audible voice, "but just something small for Ethan, nothing more." James smiled widely, feeling a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in a long time. "Deal," he replied, extending his hand to seal it. Emily shook it briefly, her small, delicate hand in his. "But first," James said casually, "would you let me help finish your shopping? I came alone, and honestly, it's a bit lazy to wander the whole store by myself." The white lie sounded convincing, and Emily couldn't help but let out a small, nervous laugh. "We don't want to be a bother," she insisted, but James was already walking toward the cart she'd left in the aisle. Ethan ran behind him excitedly, clearly thrilled by the situation. Emily followed more slowly, biting her lower lip, struggling internally between her pride and the need to accept help. James took the cart and pushed it naturally, as if it were the most normal thing. "So, where do we start?" he asked energetically. Ethan pointed toward the fruit aisle, with a shy smile emerging on his face. As they walked together to the fruits and vegetables section, James started grabbing items from the shelves as if shopping for himself. Red, shiny apples, ripe bananas, juicy oranges, all went into the cart with natural movements. "The apples are great this season," he commented casually. "Ethan likes them." The boy nodded enthusiastically, while Emily watched with increasingly misty eyes. "Sir, this is too much," she protested weakly, but James waved it off dismissively. "Please, call me James, and believe me, this is nothing." He kept adding items: tomatoes, avocados, onions, peppers. Then they headed to the dairy aisle, where he grabbed milk, cheese, yogurts. Emily tried to stop him several times, but each protest was met with a disarming smile and some comment on product quality. Ethan walked beside the cart. His eyes went from one item to another in amazement, as if watching magic unfold. James noted every reaction from the boy and mother, his heart filling with each timid smile from Ethan. When they reached the cookie aisle, James stopped dramatically and looked at Ethan conspiratorially. "I think there's some cookies here that a certain superhero loves," James said, glancing at Ethan with a complicit smile. The boy opened his eyes wide. His gaze flew straight to the shelf with the teddy bear cookies. James grabbed them without a second thought and put them in the cart, but didn't stop there. He added chocolate ones, vanilla, and some with colorful sprinkles. "For variety," he explained, winking at Ethan, who couldn't contain the excitement dancing on his face. Emily brought both hands to her chest, feeling her breath become irregular. "James, please, this is already too much," she pleaded with a choked voice, but he just shook his head. "We're just getting started," he replied so naturally it seemed like the most ordinary shopping. He continued pushing the cart to the next aisle, where personal hygiene products waited on orderly shelves: shampoo, conditioner, soap, toothpaste, brushes. Everything fell into the cart while Emily followed in silent shock. Her legs trembled slightly with each added item. James moved through the aisles with quiet confidence, as if he knew every corner, which he did, though Emily didn't know. He grabbed toilet paper packs, sanitary pads that he discreetly placed in the cart, noticing Emily eyeing them, but not daring to take them. Dish soap and new sponges. "These cleaning products are good," he commented, like giving friend advice. "They last long and aren't too harsh." Emily couldn't utter a word. Her eyes followed every move of this generous stranger who appeared in her life like an angel from heaven. Ethan, meanwhile, had lost his initial shyness and now walked beside James, pointing out products his mum always looked at but never bought. "My mom likes those lotions," the boy said innocently, "but she says they're too expensive." James took mental note of each comment and discreetly added those items to the cart. They reached the meat section, and James didn't hesitate to grab the same chicken package Emily had returned minutes before, plus steaks, ground beef, and fish. The cart now looked full of life, possibilities, hope. "Do you cook well, Emily?" James asked while placing a pack of shrimp in the cart. It was the first time he used her name, and she was surprised because she didn't remember telling him. "My son mentioned it earlier," he explained, noticing her confused look, though he'd actually overheard it when the boy talked to his mom in the aisle. "I cook what I can with what I have," Emily replied humbly, her voice barely a whisper. James nodded understandingly. "I'm sure you cook deliciously," he affirmed with conviction. "Love shows in the food, and you have a lot of love to give." The words were so sincere that Emily felt tears finally rolling down her cheeks uncontrollably. She wiped them quickly with the back of her hand, ashamed to show so much emotion to a stranger. James pretended not to notice and kept walking, giving her a moment of privacy while Ethan took his hand freely with the trust only kids have. "James," the little one said, looking up at him, "do you have family too?" The question was so direct and genuine it caught James off guard. For a moment, a shadow of loneliness crossed his face before he smiled again. "I have family," James replied, crouching to Ethan's level, "but not as special as the one you have with your mom." The boy smiled proudly, his cheeks puffed with happiness. "My mom is the best in the world," he declared with absolute certainty only a child can have. James ruffled his hair affectionately. "I don't doubt it for a second, champ." He stood up and looked at Emily, who had composed herself a bit, though her eyes still shone wet. "What else do you need for home?" he asked with genuine interest. Emily shook her head, unable to ask for more. "It's enough, more than enough," she insisted with a trembling voice. James observed the quite full cart, but felt something important was missing. And for Ethan, does he need school supplies, clothes, shoes? The question made Emily close her eyes, biting her lower lip. "His shoes are almost too small," she admitted ashamedly, looking down. "But that can wait." James looked at Ethan's feet and noticed the sneakers were worn and probably tight. Without another word, he turned the cart toward the clothing and shoe section of the supermarket. "Let's see what we find over here," James said enthusiastically, while Ethan jumped in excitement. Emily followed like in a dream, unable to process everything happening. James asked an employee for help finding the right shoe size for Ethan, and they ended up choosing new red sneakers that the boy loved. "Can I wear them now, Mum?" Ethan asked with bright eyes full of illusion. Emily looked at James for approval. He nodded warmly. "Of course, champ. That's what they're for." The employee helped Ethan try them on, and when the boy stood and took steps, his smile was so wide it lit up the whole aisle. "Look, Mum, they don't squeeze," he shouted joyfully while walking back and forth. James added 2 t-shirts, new pants, and even a light jacket for Ethan. For Emily, despite her protests, he placed a nice burgundy sweater she'd glanced at. The cart was now completely full, overflowing with products representing not just met needs, but restored dignity. When they finally headed to the checkout lanes, none of the 3 knew what came next would change everything forever. The register beeped as the cashier scanned item after item, the numbers on the screen climbing higher. Emily watched with overwhelming gratitude and growing nervousness. Her hands gripped her old purse strap until her knuckles turned white. Ethan, with his new sneakers on, swayed from foot to foot in contained happiness, oblivious to his mother's tension. James stayed calm beside them, hands in his pants pockets, observing the scene with a softness in his eyes few had seen. "The total is $320, the cashier announced monotonously, used to quoting figures all day. Emily felt her legs weaken, hearing that amount. It was more money than she'd seen together in months. James pulled out his wallet naturally and extended his credit card without hesitation, as if paying something insignificant. The cashier took the card and swiped it, but just then a loud voice rang from the other side of the registers. Mr. Harrington James, a man about 50, in a white shirt and tie, approached quickly with a huge smile. It was Robert, the store manager, who immediately recognized his boss. "James, what an honor to have you here," he exclaimed enthusiastically while extending his hand. "We didn't know you'd come today. We could have prepared something special." James shook the manager's hand with a polite but clearly uncomfortable smile, aware his anonymity had vanished. "Robert, I just came to do some shopping." "Nothing special," he replied, trying to downplay it. But the manager, excited by the chain owner's visit, kept talking without realizing the delicate moment. "It's a pleasure having you here, sir, owner of the chain. Anything we can improve? Any observation on service?" The words dropped like bombs, and Emily, focused on the transaction, slowly lifted her gaze, processing what she'd heard. Her honey eyes widened enormously. Her mouth formed a small O of surprise. "Owner of the chain," she repeated softly, almost breathless. James closed his eyes for a second, breathed deeply, and turned to Emily with an expression mixing apology and sincerity. "Yes," he admitted softly. "I'm the owner of these supermarkets." Emily stepped back. Her face went through a dozen emotions in seconds. Surprise, confusion, embarrassment, disbelief. You, she stammered without finishing, bringing a trembling hand to her forehead. Ethan looked at the adults without fully understanding, but sensing the tension. "James, are you important, Mum?" the boy asked, tugging her dress sleeve. Emily couldn't respond. She was in total shock. Her cheeks burned with shame, thinking she'd accepted help from the owner of the whole place. "That's why you did all this," she murmured to herself. "Because you're rich, and we're—" She couldn't finish as her voice broke. James stepped closer. His expression was genuine concern. "No, Emily, it's not because of that," he said urgently, wanting to correct the misunderstanding before it grew. Robert, finally realizing he'd messed up, apologized awkwardly and backed away slowly. The cashier had paused the payment, unsure if to continue. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrington. Emily said formally and distantly, using the last name she'd heard from the manager. I didn't mean to cause you trouble or waste your time. Her words came fast, jumbled, full of wounded dignity. Please forget all this. I can pay for my original purchase. We don't need your charity. James felt a stab in his chest at those words. It's not charity, Emily. Please, listen to me, he pleaded, with an intensity that surprised even him. She shook her head. Tears threatened again, but this time from humiliation. Of course it is. You're a powerful millionaire pitying the poor woman with her hungry kid. The description couldn't be further from what James felt. No, he said firmly, taking another step toward her. I'm a man who witnessed something beautiful, something that moved me deeply. Emily looked at him with wet eyes, unsure if to believe. Ethan, sensing his mother's distress, hugged her leg. Mom, don't cry, the boy pleaded, in a scared little voice. James knelt before both, putting his height at their level without caring that other customers and employees watched. Emily, please look at me, James asked, from his kneeling position. She lowered her gaze to him, her tears finally rolled freely down her cheeks. I didn't do this out of pity or charity, he explained firmly but emotionally. I did it because I saw in your son something money can't buy. Pure love, selfless sacrifice, true nobility. He pointed to Ethan, who looked at them with big, confused eyes. That boy returned cookies he wanted, so not to worry his mother. And you, with all the dignity in the world, were willing to go hungry so he could eat. His words came straight from the heart. In my years of business, I've met hundreds with lots of money but empty hearts. And today I met two people without a penny in their pocket, but with a wealth I can only admire. Emily sobbed openly now, covering her face with both hands. You taught me more in half an hour than I've learned in years, James continued. So please don't see this as charity. See it as thanks from someone who received an invaluable gift today. He stood slowly and extended his hand, waiting. Emily looked at James's extended hand for several seconds that seemed eternal. Her mind battled between wounded pride and the sincerity she saw in his eyes. Finally, with a trembling movement, she placed her hand in his, and James squeezed it softly but firmly, sealing a silent pact of mutual respect. Thank you, she whispered, barely audible. Thank you for seeing me as a person and not a pity case. James smiled with genuine warmth. On the contrary, thanks to you and Ethan for reminding me what really matters in life. The manager, Robert, who'd watched from a prudent distance, approached again, more carefully this time. James, do you want us to bag everything for the car? He asked professionally. James nodded and then looked at Emily and Ethan. But first, I'd like to invite you for something at the store cafe, if that's okay. Ethan jumped in excitement. The cafe with the chocolate pies in the window? He asked with bright eyes. James laughed heartily. That's the one, champ. Emily still hesitated, but her son's pleading look convinced her. Okay, but just for a bit, she accepted with a small shy smile. The three walked together to the small cafe inside the supermarket, a cozy space with wooden tables and a delicious aroma of fresh-baked bread floating in the air. Ethan practically ran ahead with his new sneakers, excited for the unexpected adventure. James ordered 3 hot chocolates and, at the boys' insistence, 3 slices of chocolate pie. They sat at a table by the window where golden afternoon light streamed in, creating a warm, comforting atmosphere. You know, Ethan, James began as the waiter brought the steaming drinks, when I was your age, my mum struggled to feed us too. Emily lifted her gaze, surprised. She didn't expect that confession. We were 5 siblings, and she worked cleaning houses. James continued with nostalgia in his voice. Many times I had to return things I wanted because I knew the money didn't stretch. Ethan looked at him with absolute attention, as if each word was a treasure. And what happened after? The boy asked with childish curiosity. James smiled while stirring his hot chocolate. What happened is my mom never gave up. She kept going with dignity and love, just like your mom. The words made Emily feel a lump in her throat. That's why when I saw you today, James explained, looking directly at Emily, I didn't see someone needing pity. I saw my own childhood reflected. I saw my mother's strength in you. Emily blinked rapidly to hold back new tears. I haven't felt very strong lately, she admitted with a broken voice, lowering her gaze to her cup. I lost my job 3 months ago. I worked as an administrative assistant at an advertising firm. James listened with genuine attention, without interrupting. At first I thought I'd find something quick, she continued, but with the economic downturn, it's been impossible, and the savings ran out weeks ago. Her fingers traced nervous circles around the hot cup. I've been doing cleaning jobs, babysitting, whatever comes up, but it barely covers rent and basic food. Ethan, who knew parts of the story but not all details, squeezed his mother's hand on the table. My mom is really smart, he declared proudly. She knows computers and hard math. James smiled at the boy's unconditional loyalty. I have no doubt, champ. He leaned forward slightly with a thoughtful expression. You know what, Emily? James said after sipping his chocolate. My company needs people in the administrative area at headquarters. Emily looked at him wide-eyed, not daring to interpret where this was going. We need someone organized, responsible, with office experience, and who has the kind of values you clearly possess. The words hung in the air between them. Are you offering a job? Emily asked with a trembling voice. James nodded firmly. Yes, but I want to make something very clear. It's not charity or a favor. It's a real job offer for an existing position we need to fill. He pulled a business card from his wallet and slid it across the table. If you're interested, show up Monday at this address. Ask for Mrs. Karen in HR, and she'll explain everything about the job and conditions. Emily took the card with shaking hands, reading the gold letters shining under the light. James Harrington, CEO, Providence Grocery Chain. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video. May God bless your day with abundance and joy. Emily stared at the card as if it were a winning lottery ticket. Her eyes scanned the printed words over and over. I don't know what to say, she murmured emotionally. This is more than I could have dreamed. James leaned back in his chair, observing the scene with quiet satisfaction. Say yes, that's all I need to hear. Ethan bounced in his seat. Say yes, Mum, please say yes. Emily laughed through tears, a liberating laugh from deep within. Yes, of course yes, she replied firmly, finding again the strength that had sustained her through tough months. Thank you, James. Really. Thank you for this opportunity. James extended his hand again to seal the deal. Thank you for accepting. It'll be a pleasure having you on the team. When their hands met in that formal shake, both felt a strange spark, an inexplicable connection beyond professional. They let go quickly, both a bit disconcerted by that unexpected feeling. Ethan, oblivious to the electric currents between the adults, happily attacked his chocolate pie with childish enthusiasm. This is the best day of my life, the boy declared with his mouth chocolate smeared, and looking at the smiles on his mom and James's faces, it was hard to contradict him. The following days passed in a whirlwind of changes and new hopes for Emily and Ethan. Monday morning, Emily showed up at the headquarters of the grocery chain, a modern glass and steel building in one of Chicago's upscale areas. Her hands shook as she held her printed resume and James's card. She wore her best clothes, a simple but dignified outfit she'd ironed with special care. Mrs. Karen, a woman about 60 with a kind gaze and maternal smile, received her warmly. Ah, you must be Emily, she said, inviting her into the office. James spoke very highly of you. During the interview, which felt more like a friendly chat, Emily demonstrated her knowledge in administration, computer systems, and document organization. Karen nodded, satisfied with each answer. The position is administrative assistant in operations, she explained. Hours are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday to Friday, starting salary $3,500 monthly plus benefits. Emily felt her heart flip. It was more than her previous job. When can I start? She asked eagerly. You can start tomorrow if you like, Karen replied, smiling. Though we need some documents. First, ID, proof of address, social security, the usual. Emily nodded enthusiastically. I'll do whatever's needed. I'll bring them tomorrow without fail. Karen stood and extended her hand. Then, welcome to the team, Emily. I know you'll do excellent work. When Emily left the building with the job contract in hand, she couldn't hold back happy tears. She called her older sister, the only family in the city, to share the good news. I can't believe it, Sarah. I have a job, a real job with fixed pay. Her sister screamed excitedly on the line. That afternoon, picking Ethan up from school, the boy ran to her as always, but this time she lifted him and spun him in the air. "What's up, Mum?" he asked, laughing from the spin. "Your mum got a job, my love. A wonderful job, thanks to our angel James." Ethan clapped joyfully. "Will we see him again?" The question made Emily's heart beat faster. "Maybe, sweetie, maybe," she replied with a mysterious smile. Tuesday morning, Emily arrived punctually for her first day. Nerves tickled her stomach. Karen received her and toured the facilities, introducing her to colleagues who greeted kindly. Her desk was in a spacious, bright area with a new computer and all needed supplies. "Your main job will be coordinating inventory reports from all branches," Karen explained, "and supporting logistics with documentation." Emily listened to every instruction with absolute attention, taking mental notes. Mid-morning, focused on reviewing files on the computer, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "How's your first day going?" She turned quickly, and there was James, in an impeccable grey suit and a warm smile. "James," Emily exclaimed, standing fast, almost knocking her chair. He laughed at the formality. "Please, just James. Here we all use first names." Emily nodded, still a bit nervous in his presence. "It's going great, thanks. Everyone's been so nice." James approached a bit more. His eyes scanned the organized desk approvingly. "Glad to hear it," James said, resting a hand on the desk edge. "If you need anything, my office is upstairs. Feel free to find me anytime." There was something in his tone beyond professional courtesy, a special warmth reserved for her. Emily felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thanks, but I'm sure Mrs. Karen will guide me well," she replied, trying to sound professional. James nodded but didn't leave. He seemed to want to say more. "Emily, he started, but was interrupted by his secretary appearing urgently. "James, sorry, but you have the investor meeting in 5 minutes." He sighed resignedly. "On my way." He turned to Emily one last time. "See you later then." She nodded and watched him walk firmly to the elevator. For the rest of the day, Emily couldn't help thinking of that brief encounter, how her heart raced when he was near, how his eyes seemed to say things his words didn't. "Don't be silly," she scolded herself mentally. "He's your boss, a millionaire, and you're just another employee." But no matter how she tried to convince herself, she couldn't deny what she felt. And what she didn't know was that in his upstairs office, James felt exactly the same confusion. The following weeks established a new, exciting routine for Emily. Each morning she dropped Ethan at school and arrived punctually at work, diving into her tasks with absolute dedication. She learned fast, faster than Karen anticipated, and soon handled more complex duties with impressive efficiency. Her colleagues appreciated her positive attitude and willingness to help, and department heads noted her professionalism. James passed by her area more often than necessary, always with some excuse, checking a report, asking for data, verifying order. Their encounters were brief but intense, full of glances lasting a second too long, smiles, meaning more than words, said. Emily began to look forward to those moments, fixing herself with extra care each morning, choosing blouses, thinking which colors suited her best. And James found any reason to go down to that floor to see the smile that brightened his day. One Friday afternoon, when most employees had left, James came down again and found Emily still at her desk finishing a report. "Working overtime?" he asked, leaning on her cubicle door frame. Emily looked up from her computer and saw James leaning against the frame, his silhouette against the hallway light. "Just want to finish this report before leaving," she replied with a tired smile. "Logistics needs it early tomorrow." James entered the cubicle slowly, noting the perfectly organized folders on the desk, colorful sticky notes with reminders in clear, pretty handwriting. "It's Friday night, Emily. Work can wait till Monday." She shook her head gently. "I like leaving everything ready, so I can enjoy the weekend worry-free." James admired that dedication, that responsibility beyond clocking hours. "And Ethan, who's watching him?" Emily checked her wristwatch. "He's with my sister Sarah. She picks him up from school Fridays because I sometimes leave later." James nodded understandingly, but his expression showed concern. "I don't want you feeling you have to overwork to prove something," he said softly but firmly. "You've already proven your worth these weeks. Everyone in the company raves about your work." The words warmed Emily's chest comfortingly. "Thanks, that means a lot," Emily replied, saving the document she'd been working on. Finally accepting it could wait for Monday. This job's been a blessing, James, not just for the money, but because it restored my confidence in myself. She stood and tidied her desk, shutting down the computer and filing papers in drawers. James watched her with an intensity she could feel, even without looking directly. The confidence was always there, he affirmed. It just needed the chance to shine. Emily grabbed her purse, a new one bought with her first paycheck, and turned to him. In the nearly empty office, with city lights starting to turn on through windows, there was unexpected intimacy between them. "Can I invite you to dinner?" James asked suddenly. The words came before he could think them through. Emily froze. Her heart started pounding wildly. "To dinner," she repeated unsurely. James hurried to clarify, nervous like a teen. "As thanks for your excellent work, nothing more." But both knew it was a lie. Emily hesitated. Her mind battled between appropriate and what her heart wanted. "I don't know if it's right," she said finally honestly. "You're my boss and I." James raised a hand, interrupting gently. "You're right. Forgive me. It was inappropriate." He looked genuinely sorry, rubbing his neck nervously. The following silence was awkward. Both wanted to say more, but words stuck in their throats. "Though," Emily added after seconds that felt eternal, "we could grab a quick coffee as co-workers." James looked up with renewed hope. "Yes." She nodded with a shy smile. "But it has to be quick. I don't want to abuse my sister's time with Ethan." James smiled broadly like he'd received the best gift. "I know a place nearby. They have the best coffee in the neighborhood." They left the office together, and while waiting for the elevator, their hands brushed accidentally. It was minimal contact, but both felt it like an electric shock. They glanced sideways, blushing, not knowing what to say. When the elevator doors opened, they entered silently, but their hearts spoke volumes. The cafe was just 2 blocks from the office, a small cozy spot with exposed brick walls and warm hanging lights. James ordered 2 cappuccinos and 2 fresh scones, and they sat at a table by the window. "This place reminds me of the diner my mum took me to as a kid," James commented while waiting for drinks. "After grocery shopping, if we had enough, she'd buy a scone to share." Emily listened attentively, fascinated by these glimpses of humanity James shared. "Sounds like your mum was very special." James nodded with nostalgia in his eyes. "She passed away 5 years ago. Cancer." The confession came with contained pain. "I'm so sorry," Emily said instinctively, taking his hand across the table in consolation. James looked at their joined hands and didn't let go. "She would have loved meeting you and Ethan," he murmured emotionally. "She would have seen in you what I saw that day at the store." The waiter brought the drinks, and they separated hands reluctantly. They sipped their cappuccinos in comfortable silence, the kind only between people who understand without words. For the first time in years, both felt not alone in the world. "Can I ask something personal?" Emily said after a sip of coffee. James nodded. "Anything." She toyed with the napkin nervously. "Why does a successful man like you, with all that money, not have his own family? If it's not too bold." James laughed sadly. "Not bold. Fair question." He leaned back in his chair. "I guess I focused so much on business, building the empire my mom dreamed for us, that I forgot to build a personal life." His fingers traced circles on the cup's surface. "I've had relationships, sure, but always with women who only saw my money, my position." The honesty in his voice was palpable. "Never found someone who saw me, James, not the millionaire." Emily felt a pang in her heart. "That must be very lonely." He looked straight into her eyes. "It was, until a few weeks ago." The words hung suspended, loaded with meaning neither dared name yet. Emily looked away, blushing. Her heart beat so hard she was sure he could hear it. The moment was interrupted by Emily's phone vibrating with a message from her sister. "It's Sarah," Emily said, checking her cell, asking if I'll be long. James checked his watch and was surprised to see almost 2 hours had passed since leaving the office. "I didn't notice the time," he admitted with a guilty smile. Emily couldn't believe time flew so fast either. "Me neither." They stood, and James insisted on paying despite her protests. They stepped out to the street, where night had fully fallen over Chicago. Traffic was still heavy, but building lights created a magical atmosphere. "I'll drive you home," James offered, pointing to his SUV parked nearby. Emily was about to refuse out of habit, but remembered public transport at that hour would be crowded and slow. If it's no trouble, she accepted finally. During the drive, they talked about everything and nothing, discovering small things about each other. That both loved old movies, neither could stand cilantro, both had a weakness for sunsets. When they reached the modest building where Emily lived with Ethan, she felt momentarily ashamed of the world difference between them, but James looked without judgment, only tenderness. "Thanks for the ride," Emily said, unbuckling her seatbelt. "And for the coffee, the talk was really nice." James turned off the engine and faced her. "For me too, more than you know." There was a moment of tension. Both wanted to say more, do more, but time and circumstances weren't right. "See you Monday, then," she said, opening the door. James nodded. "Take care, Emily, and give Ethan a hug from me." She smiled warmly. "I will." As she climbed the stairs to her third-floor apartment, she could feel James's gaze following until she vanished from sight. When she entered home, Sarah greeted her with a complicit smile. "You're late and with that love-struck face," her sister teased. Emily blushed. "Don't be silly, just coffee." But Sarah knew her too well. Coffee that has you floating on clouds." Ethan ran from his room, hearing his mother's voice. "Mum, did you see James today?" The innocent question made Emily redder. "Yes, my love. I saw him at the office." Ethan clapped happily, oblivious to the emotional whirlwind his question stirred. The next days at the office were a delicious mix of professionalism and complicit glances. James and Emily kept appearances before other employees, but when crossing in hallways, when hands brushed passing documents, when eyes met in meetings, there was a secret language only they understood. Karen, with her years of experience, noticed the subtle changes in both. "Be careful, dear," she warned Emily, one day over coffee in the break room. "Mixing work with feelings can be tricky." Emily shook her head. "I don't know what you mean, Karen." The older woman laughed wisely. "You may be young, but I have eyes and a romantic heart." Emily sighed, defeated. "Is it that obvious?" Karen patted her shoulder. "Only to who knows how to look. But don't worry, your secret's safe with me." That afternoon, as Emily was leaving, she found a small note on her desk. "Free this Saturday? I'd like you and Ethan to see a special place. Jay." Her heart leaped. Hands trembled slightly holding the paper. She wrote on the back, "We'd love to," and left it discreetly on James's secretary's desk. Saturday dawned with clear, bright skies, perfect for the promised adventure. James picked them up at 10 a.m., dressed casually in jeans and a cream shirt highlighting his tanned skin. Ethan ran out to hug him, which James returned with genuine affection. "Ready for adventure, champ?" The boy bounced excitedly. "Yes." "Where are we going?" James winked. "It's a surprise." During the 40-minute drive, they sang radio songs and played Guess the Animal. Emily watched from the passenger seat as James interacted with her son so naturally, as if they'd always been part of his life. They finally arrived at a ranch outside the city with stables, horses, and wide green fields. "Welcome to my getaway," James announced, parking. Ethan yelled excitedly, seeing the horses. "Real horses. Can we ride them?" James laughed. "That's why we're here." The ranch owner, an older man named Mr. Thomas, received him warmly. "James, kid, long time no see around here." They hugged strongly. "Mr. Thomas, meet Emily and her son Ethan." The old man looked at them with sparkling eyes. "So finally brought someone special. About time," he commented playfully, making both adults blush. Mr. Thomas showed them the stables with 6 beautiful horses of different colors and sizes. Ethan was amazed, gently touching their soft muzzles and laughing when they blew warm air on his hands. "This one's Cinnamon," James explained, pointing to a light brown horse. "He's the calmest, perfect for beginners." With infinite patience, James taught Ethan how to approach the animal, pet it right, hold the reins. Then, with Mr. Thomas's help, they lifted the boy onto the horse while James walked beside, holding him firmly. Ethan's laughter echoed across the ranch, pure and crystalline like wind chimes. Emily watched with happy tears. Her heart expanded seeing her son so joyful, free of worries. After Ethan's ride, James invited her to mount a larger horse. "I don't know if I can," she doubted. "I'll go with you," James promised, mounting first and extending his hand. Heart pounding, Emily took his hand and climbed behind, wrapping her arms around his waist. As the horse trotted gently, she tightened the embrace, feeling James's body heat and strength against hers. In that moment, riding together under the midday sun, both knew what they felt could no longer be denied. To add a touch of American flair, they paused for a picnic with classic PB&J sandwiches and fresh lemonade, sharing stories about childhood holidays like 4th of July fireworks that mirrored their growing sparks. November brought cooler days and starry nights, and with it news exciting the whole office. The holiday season was near. Emily had been working at the company for 3 months and become a key piece in operations. Her colleagues truly appreciated her, and she'd found not just a job, but true friendship. But most important was what grew between her and James, that feeling neither dared name aloud, but everyone in the office could sense in the air. They sought each other with any excuse. Conversations extended longer than needed, and when together, the world seemed to vanish around them. Ethan, who visited the office occasionally when Emily couldn't find a sitter, had developed deep affection for James, calling him Uncle James naturally. One Friday afternoon, with December peeking on the calendar, James appeared at Emily's cubicle with an expression mixing nervousness and excitement. "I have a proposal for you and Ethan," he said without preamble, hands in pants pockets. Emily stopped typing and gave him full attention. "This year I want to do something different for Christmas," James continued, sitting in the chair beside her desk, turning it to face her. "Normally I spend the holidays alone, watching movies and eating takeout from the corner Chinese place." The confession made Emily's heart shrink with sadness. "But this year," he added with a shy smile, "I'd like to share it with people who really matter to me." His eyes looked at her with intensity, leaving no doubt who he meant. "I'd love for you and Ethan to come to my house on Christmas Day. We could decorate the tree together, make dinner, spend family time." The word family resonated in Emily's chest like a drum. "James, she started, but he interrupted gently. "I know it might be bold, and if you prefer spending Christmas with your sister, I'll understand perfectly." Emily shook her head quickly. "It's not that. It would be an honor for us." Her voice came out emotional, loaded with feelings threatening to overflow. James smiled widely, his face lit up like a child's. "Really?" She nodded. "Really, Ethan will be thrilled." What neither said aloud was they were thrilled too. The days before Christmas passed in a whirlwind of preparations and anticipation. Emily insisted on contributing by making traditional dishes, pumpkin pie, eggnog, and turkey stuffing learned from her grandma. James ensured to buy the most beautiful tree he found, nearly 10 feet tall, filling his living room with fresh pine scent. He also bought boxes of holiday ornaments, colorful lights, shiny baubles, and a golden star for the top. On Christmas Eve afternoon, when Emily and Ethan arrived at James's house, they were awestruck by the residence. It was large but cozy, with ivory walls, well-kept gardens, and huge windows letting in sunset light. "Whoa!" Ethan exclaimed, wide-eyed. "It's like a mansion." James laughed, receiving them at the door. "It's just a house, champ, but it'll be more special with you here." He invited them in, and Emily marveled at the elegant yet warm decor, pictures on walls, dark wood furniture. But what caught her eye most was a large photo in the living room, an older woman with a kind smile hugging a young James. "My mum," he explained, following her gaze. "She would have loved this day." They started decorating the tree with Ethan as operations director, telling the adults where to place each ornament with expert seriousness. James lifted the boy in his arms to reach high branches. Emily took photos with her phone, capturing moments she knew she'd treasure forever. They played holiday music in the background, classic carols filling the house with joy. While decorating, James shared childhood stories, how his mother worked tirelessly so he and his siblings had at least a small gift each Christmas. Once, he recounted nostalgically, she worked double shifts a whole month to buy us a used bike we'd all share. Emily listened attentively, understanding more the depth of the man before her. "That's why I value what you have so much," James continued, looking directly at her. "Because I know what unconditional love is, giving everything without expecting back." Ethan, tired from decorating, sat on the big couch with hot cocoa. James made him. "Uncle James," the boy said sleepily, "can I tell you a secret?" James knelt before him. "Of course, champ." Ethan looked seriously. "I asked Santa to let us be your real family." The following silence was deep and emotional. James felt a lump in his throat, his eyes moistened at the child's innocent, sincere request. Emily brought a hand to her chest, unable to hold tears rolling down her cheeks. "Ethan," James murmured with choked voice, "that would be the best gift I could get in my whole life." He stood and walked to the window, looking at neighbors' holiday lights, breathing deep to compose himself. Emily approached slowly, standing beside him. "James," she said softly, "we want that too." He turned to her. Their eyes met in a gaze saying everything words hadn't expressed for months. "Really?" he asked, barely audible. She nodded, taking his hand in hers. "From the first day, though I didn't want to admit it, I knew you were special." James squeezed her hand tenderly. "You changed my life completely. You taught me money means nothing without someone to share it with." They looked back and saw Ethan asleep on the couch, curled with a pillow. His peaceful face reflected a child's sense of safety and love. "Let's finish the tree," Emily whispered, "so when he wakes, he sees the full magic." They worked in complicit silence for the next hour, placing last baubles, wrapping light strands carefully around the tree, adding silver tinsel shining like snow under lights. When they finally plugged in the lights, the tree lit up with hundreds of colorful twinkling points, creating a magical spectacle. The room filled with warm, welcoming light, multicolored reflections danced on walls and their faces. "It's perfect," Emily sighed, admiring their joint work. James wasn't looking at the tree, he was looking at her. "Yes, it is perfect." He went to the sound system and lowered the music volume to a soft murmur. "Emily, there's something I need to say." He began returning beside her before the lit tree. His voice trembled slightly, hands moved nervously. She looked expectantly. Her heart beat so hard she felt it in her ears. "These months with you have been the happiest of my life," James confessed. His eyes shone with genuine emotion. "Every morning I wake excited to work because I know I'll see you. Every talk fills me with joy. Every smile of yours lights my whole day." Emily felt tears blur her vision. "Me too, James," she admitted tremblingly, stepping toward him. "At first I tried denying it. Thought it was impossible. We were from different worlds." A tear rolled down her cheek, and James wiped it gently with his thumb. "But the truth is, I've never felt more complete than with you." He took both her hands in his, holding them like the world's most valuable treasure. "We're not from different worlds," he affirmed convincingly. "We're two people who met exactly when they should." The Christmas tree light created a magical halo around them, as if the universe blessed that moment. "That day at the supermarket," James continued, "when I saw that brave boy return his cookies and that incredible mother keep her dignity despite everything, I knew I'd witnessed something special." He brought her hands to his chest, where his heart raced. "I didn't know then I was meeting the family I'd always dreamed of." Emily sobbed softly, overwhelmed by her feelings' intensity. "Emily," James said, looking straight into her eyes, his voice a whisper in the moment's intimacy, "would you give me the honor of being your boyfriend, of caring for you and Ethan, of building something beautiful together?" The world seemed to stop completely in that instant. Time froze, leaving only two hearts beating in unison under the Christmas tree lights. Emily closed her eyes a second, letting tears flow freely, tears of pure, absolute happiness. "Yes," she replied firmly, despite emotion. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." James smiled with such deep joy it transformed his face, making him look years younger. He pulled her into an embrace, communicating all they'd held for months. The longing, hope, love, grown silently between them. They stayed like that, hugged under the lit tree, hearing each other's heartbeat, feeling the warmth and security of knowing they were finally where they belonged. "I promise," James murmured against her hair, "I'll care for you with the same respect and generosity as the day we met, that I'll never let you feel alone in this world." Emily pulled back slightly to look in his eyes. "And I promise," she said emotionally, "I'll love you not for what you have, but who you are." That man with a huge heart hiding behind the business suit. Their faces drew slowly, inevitably, until their lips met in a sweet kiss full of promises. "Are you kissing already?" a little voice asked from the couch, breaking the magical moment with childish innocence. James and Emily separated, laughing, turning to Ethan, who looked with a huge smile on his sleepy face. "Come here, champ," James called with open arms. Ethan ran to them, and James lifted him, creating a three-person hug that became family under the holiday lights. "Does this mean Uncle James will be like my dad?" the boy asked, with hope shining in his eyes. James looked at Emily for permission, and she nodded, smiling through tears. "If you want, champ, I'd love to be part of your family." Ethan hugged him tightly. "Yes, I want." Santa granted my wish. The three laughed and cried at once, united in an embrace symbolizing a new beginning, a second chance for all. James looked at his mother's photo on the wall and felt she was smiling too, proud to see her son finally complete. "Merry Christmas," Emily whispered. "The happiest of all," James replied, kissing her forehead. And as the tree lights kept dancing around them, the three knew this was just the start of something wonderful. The night continued with a delicious dinner they prepared together, laughing and enjoying each other's company as if they'd always been family. Ethan helped set the table with ceremonial seriousness. James brought out his best dishes, usually stored away. And Emily served her traditional dishes, filling the house with aromas evoking home and love. They ate until satisfied, toasted with sparkling cider to new beginnings, then sat together on the couch, watching classic holiday movies. Ethan fell asleep between them, head on James's shoulder and feet on Emily's lap. James watched them with infinite tenderness, amazed how his life changed completely in just 3 months. "What are you thinking?" Emily asked, noticing his contemplative look. He smiled. "That day at the supermarket, when I decided to approach you, I made the best decision of my life." She interlaced her fingers with his. "Me too," she sighed happily. "Sometimes I think you were an angel sent by God right when we needed it most." James shook gently. "No, you were the angels who saved me from an empty life." They stayed like that till midnight, whispering so not to wake Ethan, sharing dreams and future plans, building air castles both determined to make real. When the clock struck 12, they wished each other Merry Christmas with a tender kiss tasting of fulfilled promises. This story reminds us true wealth isn't measured in money, but in love, dignity, and generosity. James had millions in the bank, but his heart was empty until finding Emily and Ethan, who had nothing material but immense wealth in values and love. Sometimes God puts people in our path right when we need them, and other times puts us in someone's path because we're the answer to their prayers. The story of James, Emily, and Ethan teaches that acts of kindness, however small, can transform lives completely, and true love knows no class differences or economic circumstances. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, to keep getting inspiring, emotional stories. Share this message with someone needing to remember miracles exist and there's always hope, even in toughest times. Remember, every act of kindness counts. Every gesture of generosity matters, and every person you help can become the greatest blessing in your life. May God bless your path with extraordinary encounters transforming your life, and may you always find angels disguised as ordinary people when you need them most. Amen.